Today I'm going to give my thoughts on this tweet that went viral by Whatifalthist. I ran across this tweet where this guy gives some unsolicited advice to the new right, whatever that means. My number one guide to the new right today is to just have a effing heart somewhere in your body. I'm not saying to be a bleeding heart liberal who's constantly triggered, but being the opposite of your enemies is not a viable strategy. I see on the new right a complete lack of empathy for any suffering. This isn't a problem now, since the new right has no power, but if it does, don't let resentment take control of your better judgment. I've got several issues with this, so let's get into it. For starters, I made this channel out of the intense anger I was feeling in 2020, and I felt the need to make content and speak out and vent. So without anger as a motivating force, you wouldn't even be listening to my voice at all right now. And secondly, this is the same low-level cringy criticism of Trump that we saw for years. They made it sound like Trump is the meanie. Trump is the one who's ruthlessly going after people, when the reality was he was never the guy who threw the first punch. His anger, his heartlessness, was always in response to the anger and hatred from the left. The anger that the new right is feeling at the moment is not some isolated and spontaneous rage that erupted ex nihilo. It has been a slow brew that's been cooking over the decades from several sources, and in spite of all the warning signs that the pendulum swing would be brutal, the left marched on with indifference, confident in their sense of total control. We can see this growing anger in just the fact that he used the term new right. This new right is from the realization that Republicans are undoubtedly in cahoots with the Democrats, and they share almost all of their liberal priors, and thus makes them incapable of enacting the change we need. Our anger comes from the over-compassion of the empowered left, who seem to have a heart for everyone, including every criminal and degenerate. And it's allowed formerly solved problems like homelessness to run rampant in our cities again and turn them into unlivable hellscapes. Or it's that same overcompassion that eliminated social taboos of judgment or feelings of shame in the hearts and minds of most people, which has contributed to the moral rot of this country. Or it's that same overcompassion embodied in the failed idea of sanctuary cities. Our anger comes from the open hostility that we receive daily from our own leaders. And honestly, it's from seeing the lack of compassion and how we're allowed to live our lives. The way our healthcare system is set up isn't compassionate. The sterile corporate culture we're forced to work in isn't compassionate. The debt slavery that has captured the U.S. isn't compassionate. The COVID protocols, which we all had to get through, certainly weren't compassionate either. America is hurting, and we all know it. It's shockingly poor. It's all falling apart right in front of us. And any solutions that we have thrown out in the past, in good faith and in a good tone, have been rejected and called racist and homophobic and blah, 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 blah. We supported the good-natured John McCain and almost offensively non-offensive Mitt Romney. We had John Boehner and Paul Ryan. And what did that get us? A competent Obama administration that made good on its promise to fundamentally transform this country. Well, what is left for us but anger? Especially when the solutions are right there and are obviously ignored. These problems are not eternal mysteries that are unsolvable. America feels like when you come across a traffic jam and it's all at a standstill, and when you finally get to where the holdup was, there's nothing there. No wreck, no hobo out in the middle of the road waving a gun. Nope, literally nothing. The problem was that at some point, the first idiot stopped in the middle of the road for literally nothing, causing all the problems after that. And this is what has captured the left and ruined us. It's that same feminine impulse to stop in the middle of the road for a squirrel. That's what's taken over the minds of everyone in this country. You could see it in prison reform, or mass migration, or civil rights, gay rights, or climate change. It's the willingness to destroy your own country to avoid hurting someone's feelings. Tough love is gone, baby. In fact, we're told that tough love is hatred, it's bigotry, it's fascism, and on it goes. Another bone that I have to pick with this guy is that he says that being the opposite of your enemies is not a viable strategy. And again, that is completely wrong. Leftists are not only factually wrong, but they're fractally wrong as well. They're wrong on every single level. They're morally wrong, they're emotionally wrong, they're spiritually wrong, they're financially wrong. They are not the compassionate ones. We are. Doing the opposite of whatever they have done over the last 100 years would make such a massive and positive difference in the world, our brains couldn't even comprehend how different and wonderful it would all be. As we are dragged further and further into the sinkhole of disparity by our supposedly democratically elected leaders, you're naturally going to see some well-deserved righteous anger directed at them. It's all righteous and all well-deserved. Righteous anger, righteous pettiness, righteous laughing at the misfortune of our enemies is all justified. The fact that this guy is defending them and gaslighting you and saying, hey everybody, let's lay off them. I mean, come on, have a heart. It's despicable. Is there not people who are deserving of hatred and a lack of compassion? We hear the cliche line all the time about how our prisons are overcrowded. And yet simultaneously we see videos daily of violent criminals who all should be locked up. Are those people deserving of our compassion? Where's the compassion for the taxpayer? Where's the compassion for the law-abiding citizen? Where's the compassion that would drive action to make our cities safe? It's all been eviscerated because that compassion is embodied in rules and consequences and taboos and punishments. It's the compassion and acknowledging the reality of race differences. And it's all backed by a common morality to act as a foundation for law and order. So don't let this guy fool you. He wants you to act against your interests, against your gut, against everything that you know to be true. He wants you to stop resisting and let them win, because then the confrontation would stop and those yucky feelings would go away. But now is not the time to let off the gas. Now is the time to slam that pedal to the floor. The narratives that hold this whole stupid thing up are falling apart. No one believes in them anymore, outside of boomers, and they're all dying off. So no, I'm not going to have a heart and let off. Not now. You know that scene in You Were Never Really Here, where Joaquin Phoenix beats the pedophiles to death with a hammer in the apartment? That's what our leaders are afraid of the most. And no plea for some heckin' empathy, man, is going to stop it, because it's reality. It's what justice looks like. It's chaos and it's order, and sometimes there has to be chaos to have order. Sometimes a fire sweeps through a forest to give it new growth, and to kvetch about it is to be weak. I'm going to end this video with an audio clip of Jonathan Bowden that I think is pertinent to this topic. So, enjoy it. I'll see y'all later.
When the IRA committed an atrocity, they turned it to my guy, oh, look at the British, look at the loyalists. And people say, well, what about this that you've done? I say, no, look at what they've done. Deep down philosophically, that's not good enough. The problem we have is if you are very Christian or post-Christian in immorality, where there's a total dualism of good and evil, and if you think and have been indoctrinated at school from a very early age that our group has committed some monstrous evil, you are dwarfed, to invent a word. You are semi-humiliated from the start. When you begin to assert yourself, you suddenly begin to remember, oh, I need to apologise before I do. And that's not just a sort of strange intellectual concept. Millions do that all the time. They say, I'm not this, but. They say, I don't want to make an extremist remark, but. They say, well, I don't really wish to get into the area of self-assertion, but. And the reason for all of that garbage is because of this shadow, or those that relate to it in the background. Otto Spengler wrote Decline of the West after the Great War, which of course was a dysgenic war, which had a considerably destructive impact upon Western rulership at every level. But as you look around, you sense the decline, and if you have a decline and you have a desire to assert yourself to arrest the decline, and you have to apologize to yourself about even having the idea of assertion to arrest decline, you're not going to get anywhere, are you? No. And that's what this weapon is. Now, my view is the following. I'm technically technically a pagan. And pagans believe that creation and destruction go together, that love is fury, that whatever occurred and whatever occurs, we don't have to apologize. We step over what exists. But everything has been rebuilt, because everything can be rebuilt and built beyond what even existed in the past. So if somebody says to you, you're descended from brigands, which is in a sense, individually, what that sort of contrary ideology is, you say, oh, I'm not going to bother about Dickers and who did what to whom. I've overcome that. Oh, well, I don't like the sound of that. That's a bit illiberal. And I'd say, you just say, liberalism is moral syphilis. And I'm stepping over it. Well, I don't like the sound of that. You sound like a bit of a fascist to me. And I'd say, there's nothing wrong with fascism. Nothing wrong with fascism at all. Everyone now adopts a reverse semiotic and runs against what they actually think in order to convince people who don't agree with them anyway. Because democracy, and I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Democrat. When I supported the challenge in the party that I used to be in, I did it for various reasons, but to encourage greater democracy wasn't necessarily one of them.
For various reasons.
But authoritarianism has to have morality with it. Those who make an absolute claim and who don't live up to the nature of that claim, or don't even begin to live up to the nature of it, can't advocate authority. Mosley, for example, was regarded as above the movements that he led. And therefore there was a degree of absolute respect, even if people disagreed with him totally on the European nation and various other things, because of the respect he had as a man. And if you're to lead right-wing movements, you have to have that degree of character. Character is integral to that type of authority. It would be so in a military commander, never mind a political one. If it's not there, you can't make authoritarian pledges and carry on in that sort of way, because you're just involved in the grubby game, which consists of Labour, Liberal, Tory, and different versions of the same thing. To make an absolute claim and not live up to it is worse than being in New Labour. Because they don't pretend, even though people have been fooled. So my view is that we must return again to sets of ideas which suit us, that are cardinal for us, that are metaphysically objective and subjective, that see the flux and warp and weft of life and its complicatedness, but know there are absolute standards upon which things are based. If we can't overcome the weapons which are used against us, we will disappear.
Right.
These are the facts.
Yeah.
And therefore we have to do so in our own minds. No people can survive if it incorporates as a mental substructure an anti-heroic myth about itself. This is why war is largely fought in the mind of the modern world.